Right, second half of help with this paper. So if you think back to question 1 and 2, you've always got to be thinking they're not going to ask me to do the same thing twice, and there's a development in the whole paper. So that's the skill to doing a GCSE paper 1. So question 1, you just pick out 4 things about Rosabel. If we go back up, well, I lost the one I did the other day, so I haven't got the things, but it's just list 4 things about Rosabel. It's simple retrieval, and the main aim is to check that you can read. It's as simple as that. Can you read the question? Can you read the extract? I'm making it about Rosabel. It's not advanced reading, but it's to catch out kids that either their reading age is very low, but also it's more to catch out children that don't sort of read closely enough. So you might get people, say, listing 4 things about the bus, for example. Question 2 then is talking about the language. How is the writer using language? And it's giving you very small extracts. It wants you to be very specific. Look at the words. And remember I said about the fact that it's using some very positive, sort of almost beautiful language about the shops, but then the bus is described in a very harsh way. Question 3 is actually very straightforward. It tends to confuse a lot of people, and it tends to cause a little bit of stress, because a lot of the work you do in English is quote, evidence, effect. Is there metaphors, is there adjectives, etc. Whereas actually, sometimes just the order of things can be as important and as effective. So it says here you need to think about the whole of the source. Now, it doesn't mean you have to mention every single bit of it. It means you have to think about the flow. How has the writer structured the text to interest you as a reader? Now, as long as you mention what happens at the start, any changes, zooms, shifts, focuses, and then the end. As long as you mention those 3 things and why, you can do this quite easily. Again, it's only with 8 marks, so you're only going to spend 10 minutes on it. What you don't want to do is sort of spend 15-20 minutes and then find you've got no time to do the 20 mark question. So if we look at it, how does it start? Well, it starts with Oxford Circus. Now, it's a little bit and London centric, but presuming that and most students would realise that Oxford Circus is in London, so we're very busy, and it starts with getting on a bus after she's been at work. You then look, you can always spot a lot of the shifts and zooms and focuses because they're the start of paragraphs. So she starts in Oxford Circus, she then goes on to the bus, but she's looking at the windows. So is that because she doesn't want to leave? Is it because she's it's more beautiful outside? And we don't, it's I'm trying to get you to get in her mind. You then got the next bit. She began to think about what happened during the day. So it's zooming into her thoughts. Now before it does that, it's actually told you about how horrible the bus is. So it's done that before we get into her thoughts. Right? So it's trying to establish that her life is a little bit grim, maybe a little bit hard, but what it does have is there are some things that are nice for her, like looking at the nice shops or the flowers and things. And then there's a definite shift here to talk about the other girl. So she's obviously important. Like, why would she be thinking about her? And then this is all in flashback. So she's going backwards about an event in the day. She sat on the bus and she goes back to that. And then it ends with the hat. and you get the word there, a sudden ridiculous feeling of anger. So that's quite a sharp shift, right? So all you need to do is talk about those three things and explain the effect. So if I do formatting, at the start of the extract we see Rosabel leaving behind the busy, beautiful shops of central central London, right? And what's the effect of that? Well, does it make us feel sorry for her? Does it make us think her life isn't very exciting? And this suggests she is sad as her life is dull and only brightened up by little items and moments of happiness, like the flowers. Right. The bus. Now you've already mentioned the language in the bus journey, so you don't need to go into the detail of the mud and the atmosphere and all the people. But the bus journey emphasizes this as the horrible bus takes her away from the pretty shops. Now you don't need to put in a quote if you're not talking about language. And you can use quotes later on when you want to talk about the sudden shift. So then the next bit, the writer then shifts to her thoughts and we see how miserable her life is as she has to surround herself all day with pretty things she can't have. Right? But that's the shift into her thoughts. And then by introducing the red-haired girl, we see, and then you can finish that one yourself and sort of explain, well, what does, we see how she has to be around rich people all day. We see how it might be very frustrating for her. We see how she has to be very nice to people. Obviously there's lots of crossover with respect to calls, but what happened when this paper was on was you got a lot of people started talking about Eva Smith, which you don't do, but it just gives you an insight into the way it was for shop girls. You then have at the end the dramatic shift in, I would say, tone, when the writer describes her sudden ridiculous. And I'm going to do what I taught you. You can miss out words if you use the ellipsis. Illustrates. And what about her? Illustrates Rosabel's frustration, unhappiness, etc. And then always mention the last line. So the last line makes it clear, and then explain what the writer's trying to say. Makes it clear that Rosabel is in a bad situation, that Rosabel maybe feels sad, that sort of thing. So you don't need to talk about the specific words and their effect and why they're chosen. What you need to do is you talk about how the writer's changed. So the overall thing, think about structure, is in a piece of writing, it's like a road. Yeah, is the author is trying to get you from this, from a destination to the other end of the road, and on the way there'll be signposts, or there'll be scenery, or there'll be junctions where you turn left or right, and the writer is directing you down this road so that when you get to the end, you've got to the same place they want you to get, which in this case is feeling very sorry for Rosabel, and also feeling that it's very unfair that maybe young women are having to work very hard in shops, but they'll never have an opportunity to buy the things in them because they're shop girls, and it's in the sort of 1920s, 30s was quite a low paying job, and we crowd these workers in on these horrible buses into the middle of London to serve all these rich people, but then they have to go away because they're not it's not their place to be, and it's all very sad. So that's the journey he wants to take you on, and he does it through the language at the start in question 2, but he also does it with the structure. Right, question 4, it's a little bit more complicated than what I'm doing, and I think I'm about to have a delivery, so I might just pause the video, and I've completely lost the ability to do this. Right, question 4. The question 4, look, is worth 20 marks. This is where you've got to put your effort. So it's an hour and 45 paper. So it's 15 minutes for the reading, 45 minutes to do these 4 questions. You've got to leave 20 minutes for this question. You have to. Even if you haven't sort of finished question 2 or even started question 3, you go to question 4 and then go back to the others, because there's so many marks on this, and it's very easy to pick up 6, 7, 8 marks just by writing enough and just doing it in a basic way. What we do end up having is that children spend ages on 2 and 4, sorry, in 2 and 3, only get 4 marks on each, and then they write 2 lines on question 4 and they've lost 20 marks. Right, so question 4, it does say here you read from line 19 to the end, and that is all the bit with the girl with the red hair. The student says, this part of the story sent Hatchop shows that the red-headed girl has many advantages in life, and I think Rosabel is right to be angry. To what extent do you agree? Right, so question 4. Right, question 4. Consider your own impressions of the red-headed girl. Alright, so your impressions, what do you think of her? The important bit doesn't actually tell you, and I've made several complaints, a lot of other teachers have it in meetings with the exam board. We say, why isn't the question clearer? Why don't you tell the students exactly what you want to do? And their answer is always the same. It's question 4 at the end of the reading paper. It's meant to be hard, so that students have to work it out. It's part of the reading skill. Evaluate how. Now it's the how bit is important. How the writer conveys a reaction, support your response. So what they're actually talking about with the how is fancy shapes. Doesn't matter. Draw is oh god. Oh, I've got a touch screen computer. Turn that off. Is they're talking about the methods. And again, I know I keep mentioning it, but each question is something different. So you've already done language analysis, i.e. close language analysis. You've already looked at structure. So, and what else is left? Well, it's the big methods. So, I'm setting characters and symbolism. Right? So how do they use the big methods? And because it says to what extent do you agree, you have to evaluate. And all that means at this stage is that you have to justify what you think. So if you're saying we feel sorry for her, you explain that. So let's start with characters, because that's what the passage starts with. But there had been one other, a girl with beautiful red hair and a white skin and eyes of colour of that green ribbon shot with gold they got from Paris. So Rosabel's anger is understandable as, no actually, I forget that. Let's start with an overview. So at the start, you're just going to start a sentence that sums up exactly how much you agree. So you rewrite the question. So Rosabel is right to be angry as her job is very hard and being surrounded by beautiful things and beautiful people would make her feel very inferior and frustrated. Right? So the first sentence is just basically answering the question. Right, I've summed it up. But now I need to explain it in detail. So I'm going to go into the big methods. So the setting. The setting is particularly effective as the shop is full of beautiful things and even materials from Paris. And remember, this is setting up in the 1920s, I think 1930s maybe. Even from Paris, which would have seen a million miles away to Rosabel, because remember she has to get on the bus every day and get away from Oxford Circuit, so it's not like she's ever going to be able to go to Paris to see these pretty things she's selling, like where they're from. The setting is also used in that is also used to show the two different worlds, as Rosabel has to scurry upstairs and in the back amongst the boxes where the rich customers would never go. Right? So that's how setting is used. Sorry, another delivery. Right. So as you can see, you talk about setting. Now I've explained about setting, so you also need to explain the effect really. So remember that thing I said about question 2, explain it again, explain it again. You keep explaining it till you run out of things to say. You're far more likely to get a lot of marks than just making one little comment and moving on. So if you keep repeating that, you're basically doing the same thing over and over. And remember, English is a skills-based subject, so you can make 8 or 10 points, but if you don't expand on them or explain it fully, you're just doing the same skill at the same level. So we can also see how strongly she feels about this is seen in the, remember, you can use quote in the despair she shows. Now I haven't sort of gone into the word despair and sort of saying what type of word it is or explain. I'm just using it to show that this is making her sad. It's in the despair she shows, and how the untouched box represents hidden sort of treasure she can never possess. And it's why I think you've got the jewelry shop thing at the start. It's this unobtainable. She is constantly surrounded or exposed to the unobtainable. So it's stuff she can never have, and I've used a certain level of vocab, but you can put that in sort of more basic ways. And then, so you've done setting, I then go into character. The character of the red-haired girl is important as, and again you explain, as it shows us how jealous Rosabel is, how she's surrounded by these rich, pretty people all day because she has to work so hard and travel on this muddy bus. She doesn't look that good, etc., etc. So when you've explained that fully, like I did in the first paragraph, you then need to go on to symbolism. Now, all symbolism is anything a writer does. Symbolism is used through colour. And what he's done, I think, from the sort of mud and the dullness of the bus at the start and the jewellery shops, and if you look at this bit here, you've got a black hat with a feather. And the girl is so pretty and she's already so colourful that she can have a black hat. It talks about the green ribbon shot with gold all the way through. she is surrounded by colour, to show this colourful life that she is surrounded by. You know, and the feather, so the fanciness, but she will never, be able to have it herself. So I'd mention how the use of colour sort of again shows the world that she is part of, but not fully part of. So that's how you do questions 3 and 4. Obviously you can use my examples if you want, as long as you then have a go at the other points in 3 and 4 on your own. But don't worry, because in years 10 and 11, we really go over this in depth. I mean, we've been building it up. In year 7, you concentrate on question 1 and 2. Year 8, we brought in question 3. Year 9, we have brought in question 4, and obviously would have looked at it a lot more this term, but we can come back to it at the start of September. So, hope it's helpful, and hope you are well.